welcome to the Washington Conservation Guild Three Ring Circus meeting. I just want to start off by echoing Kira and thanking our sponsors listed on the screen here, the volunteers and board members for organizing this, and all the speakers who have prepared these wonderful talks for us, and all of you for coming out tonight. My name is Brianna Weekly. I'll be moderating this session related to the practical applications. We have 3 really great talks for you in here tonight, and of course there's 6 others in the other rooms. So we encourage you to move between the rooms as you wish between the talks. We've also opened a door in the back there if it's more comfortable to sneak out that way. We'll have a couple minutes after each talk for some questions, and I'll be trying to keep us all on track with the other rooms so that you can hop in and out of each talk. Without further ado, I'll introduce our first talk. Here we go. So our first talk, oh, were we not supposed to use that? Conservation Against the Odds. As the GFWC Women's History and Resource Center librarian, Joanna Church manages the extensive WHRC collections, including books, photographs, art, and artifacts, and archival materials, ensuring these unique materials are accessible to club members, researchers, and the public. She works with researchers, donors, and members, as well as offering tours of the historic GFWC headquarters in DuPont Circle. Maryland native, she has a master's degree in museum studies and 25 years of experience in small history museum and archives. Please help me welcome Joanna.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for welcoming a non-conservator to this conservation-based space. I'm glad to hear I'm in the practical applications section because you're going to see some fun things. I described this talk to a friend of mine today as I'm just going to talk about the hot mess that is the GFWC, although we're trying really hard. So, the General Federation of Women's Clubs was founded in 1890. It's a nonprofit umbrella organization for a worldwide association of volunteer women's clubs. In 1922, we bought a historic row house in DuPont Circle, the one in the middle. And in the 1950s, we purchased the houses on either side and put connecting doors through on the 3rd floor. So they function as one headquarters building, albeit with 3 addresses. The central building, 1734 N Street, with the flag waving, was built in 1875 and was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1991, largely because of GFWC, but also because of the house's earlier history. And the main purpose of headquarters and the staff that work there, there's 9 of us right now, is to facilitate the modern day activities of our member clubs, advising on projects, coordinating scholarships and contests, producing our quarterly magazine, weekly newsletter, planning our annual convention and other events. And it is also a living space. You will hear more about that in a moment, but it is a home. And then there's me. The GFWC has always been very keen to preserve and share its own history. We are very proud of that history. So we have the Women's History and Resource Center, me, which is a valued part of the organization, but is nonetheless not the main point. We're not a museum. The WHRC functions as our institutional archive, also the department that manages the art, decorative arts, and furniture that's housed at headquarters. As the intro said, so I'm repeating myself, makes the archives collection and historic rooms accessible for researchers and tourists, handle donation offers, curate small exhibits for members when I can, all the things you would expect a collections manager / curator / archivist / registrar to tackle in a small institution, plus other duties as assigned, of course. So we have maintained several historic interiors, especially in 1734, our main building, where a 1908 renovation led to some really beautiful spaces, and some finishes that are considered part of the collection and need their own sort of preservation and conservation care. As an example up here, a couple spaces on the 2nd floor, the drawing room, which has these giant murals, which are painted on canvas and glued to the wall, and there's more of them than you could see in that picture, and they were put in about 1908, 1909. The solarium, same time period, has handmade tile on the floor and on the walls, which has not been particularly well treated over the years. And then I threw in a picture, this guy came with the house, he's rising a light against the darkness or something. It's a little weird for the women's club to have a half-naked statue, and he's in bad shape, he's in worse shape than he appears. If you come on April 11th, you can see him in person and give me advice. But these are also working buildings. Offices, meeting rooms, storage, event spaces, as well as several bedrooms, kitchens, and the like. Furnishings and decor are a mishmash of historic, sometimes valuable, pieces that have been donated over the years, mixed with modern, if you take modern to mean after 1950, practical furnishings to facilitate the working spaces. Storage is at a premium, which means some pieces are on permanent display in a hallway, meeting room, or office. And our president's office here shows several of the collections categories listed on the sides are now in the open, as it were. And that's fun. The bulk of our collection is archival, with a good portion of photographs and audiovisual material, but we do also have a large artifact collection of memorabilia, for example, produced by or for GFWC, by our state federations, by individual clubs, sometimes by individual members. Everything from little enamel pins that have been given out at conventions over the years to quilts. The collection spans the late 19th century through the present day, but there are some earlier outliers that have been given to us as antiques for preservation or display. We have a bonnet that was supposed to be worn by Lucretia Mott. Maybe. It's certainly old enough, don't know if it was hers, that kind of thing that members have lovingly given us. And because we're not a museum, and because on some level, just about every artifact, especially the furniture and the servingware, was really given to us to use, especially the pieces donated to make headquarters a livable home for club women in the 20s, like our 1926 piano, which is played several times a year by Jan, our music chairman. The legacy data in the collections database is very, I wrote mushy, which maybe isn't the most professional term, fluid. There's a lot of like, should that have that number? I don't actually know who gave it to us, but we do know who gave it to us. Nobody wrote it down, but it says so on the silver thing itself, which is a fun problem to have. If I could just do that in a vacuum and sort it all out without anybody bothering me. So the traditionally sort of accessioned pieces versus education collection, decorative, donated for use, all mushed in together. Because on some level, the things that we use, we're going to keep using. But at the same time, they hold historic importance, sometimes in their own right, but often, and particularly to our members, who remember that their state federation donated it. Everything has a story to it. Sometimes I don't know till they tell me because no one wrote it down. One of my favorite categories in the collection is the art that we purchased in the 1910s and 20s to be used for art education. We literally shipped ceramics, prints, artwork around the country in these little packaged exhibits to our clubs. Pre-internet, that's how you learned if you're in rural Montana. We were teaching you good art, which has its own thing to study. But what's left, we have in the collection. This is the remains of our American ceramics collection exhibit. Likewise, our reference library was started in the 19-teens. If you need to know how to do a literacy program in 1915, I have you covered. We no longer loan those books out, but we do still use them. They're here, they're well worn, they're fragile, but they hold intrinsic value, but also have a layer of GFWC history added on. Plus, we do still use them. I had to pull a lot of these out of people's offices to make my exhibit here. And many of the conservation challenges that we face are common to any small museum or historic site. I've certainly dealt with a lot of these in my career. Tiny budget, small staff, handsy visitors, particularly bad in our case because it's all theirs, and a well-intentioned but uninformed, untrained, and sometimes uninterested board. But a few factors do help push us even further into those weeds of, whoa, is this a museum? What's happening? For one thing, the GFWC president lives at headquarters during her term. There's an apartment on the 4th floor. And for several weeks out of the year, there are other club members, board leaders, the women who come to run our events, are staying on site. There could be up to 15 women on site for weeks at a time. And this gives them free range. Some storage rooms and cabinets are locked, but others of them can't be. Our archives room, which you'll see in a moment, is literally a passageway between buildings, traversed multiple times a day, often with food and beverages. So my little no food or drink sign is cute. And our members, especially the ones who get to live and stay at headquarters, take an extremely personal sense of pride in and ownership of headquarters and all of its contents. And they assume that they will have the unfettered access to anything that will help them host parties and be fancy, just as their predecessors did. So these pictures are just a few of the beautiful dining settings from parties that I come in. I'm like, oh, that's where my title comes from. Oh, you use that? Oh. Which is we're working on, as you'll hear in a moment. Another factor that is confusing is just the way we use headquarters adds these intrinsic hazards. We have 3 buildings, and between them we have 5 working kitchens, which do get used. There's a full-scale restaurant in the back and a bar underneath the archives. If you've been to Iron Gate restaurant, that's in our backyard. We own it. In terms of hazard mitigation, the archive room here does have a fire suppression system. My predecessors worked really hard on this. But otherwise, we rely on smoke detectors and handheld extinguishers throughout the building. The HVAC system is radiators and window wall air conditioners. We do have split units in the archive, try real hard. We did recently change out the fluorescent lighting for LEDs, took out some really gross carpets. But in the end, it really is, as is common to many small institutions, we know what's wrong, but there's only so much we can do with a historic building with minimal funding. And the club members and leaders, as I've mentioned many times, I have to just keep hammering it home to myself, they love this organization's history. They treasure the material culture that exemplifies it, but they treasure it like it's in their house. It's there for them to enjoy and use, and they have ready access overnight. My current board promises me they don't rummage when they're staying overnight, not like the other ladies. When preservation concerns are brought up, they're often willing to listen. They hear me out, especially when it comes to things like the archival material that they do see as special and unique and could be in a museum in another setting. These ladies here are my committee, who are doing some processing for me using pencils, but I could not convince them on the whole beverage thing. But at least it's a water bottle and it's covered. And for major projects, like our enormous Sidney Lawrence painting in the picture on the side, which we sent to the conservator last year, they know that the experts are needed, even they don't think I should be messing with that. And they are willing to fund it, which is a huge difference from many of my organizations. And as an aside, you can only see one lady in the front there, but when I was taking this picture, there were at least 9 other club women watching this process, and finally the bonsai guys were like, they have to leave. Because it took a really long time. The Lawrence painting has been up over the fireplace since the 1920s. It's only left once, and so it was production. They did not want an audience, but it was hard to get them to leave. But when it comes to everyday concerns, please note the black border around this picture. That was deliberate. The attitude tends to be, well, we've always done it that way. Why can't I sit in that chair anymore? It's always been in my office. And particularly, whoops, don't tell Joanna we broke that. We're working on that. A lot of our members and my coworkers will come tell me if something's damaged, but this inlaid table, there's a chunk missing, and nobody knows when that happened, but it was in the last year. We are literally missing a whole dining room chair that is just not there, and nobody will fess up. Oh, I switched my slides too early, but that's okay. If I never hear again, why can't I just dip the silver into this incredibly harsh chemical? My mother always used it so much faster. I will be very happy, and that is something I've gotten in every job I've worked in. Not trying to blame my ladies there, but slowly and surely, I and my predecessors have been able to shift the culture, and that's what it is. It needs to be a culture shift at GFWC. It is a mixed bag. When I started in 2022, my coworkers and the executive board knew to keep the curtains closed in the archives, but they swore someone told them to leave the lights on 24/7, which we don't do anymore. I am not above playing on the Joanna will get mad, if only to get them to humor me for a little while. But I am really quite sure that after I have given them the run through and the silver polishing, I go home for the day. They're up all night doing whatever they want for that silver. And there's only so much I can do. So how to deal with this? On a day-to-day level, I've been prioritizing literally physical separation, removing access. I found a lockable artifact storage room so no one can redecorate their office overnight. Putting things in exhibit cases helps, partly because it's lockable, but also because it brings home to them, no, these are special. Do not put food in this one. But there's only so many spaces I can do that. We do have a lot of our artwork, our photographs, I should say, our scans. We have a room, the yellow fireplace with the really old fire door over the door. All our president portraits are there, and those are now scans, not the original photographs. So that's a plus. Been working on grants, assessment opportunities. We had a CAP assessment, thank you FAIC, last year, in 2024, I'm sorry. And I've discovered that really just hammering home best practices and increasing our professionalism and making GFWC look good because we are doing the right thing has been a great way to appeal to my members' sense of pride. But there's also been an adjustment on my part. We're not a historic house museum. When I give tours, people can sit on the furniture. It gets sat on all the time. There's one chair with a rope across it. It's a matter of finding the balance, education versus prohibition, what to let go of, what to stand firm on, listening to my members who know the organization's history so much better than I, and know that, yes, Joanna needs to give up on that. That is the thing we are going to keep using. And mitigating that. Okay, we're going to use it, but only so often, or we're going to polish it the way I say we're going to polish it. And finding the ways to do this without diminishing the quality of the events that we hold, which is very important for our members, and without diminishing the ability to share headquarters and our story with our members and with the public. So we're still looking for that balance, but I think we're on our way. Except that the president and their crew changes every 2 years, so I have to start over again in July, but we'll see. So hopefully that was within my 15-minute time frame. This is my email. We are hosting the Community Partner Day. I'm not sure I have the right name for that. The Pro Bono Day. Please come and talk to my coworkers and some of our members about ways we can keep moving GFWC forward in appropriate ways. I'm really excited about having someone other than me talk to people about silver polish. But we are open for tours during the week if you wanted to see a beautiful space, see some amazing artifacts, learn more than you possibly ever wanted to know about the history of women's clubs. Let me know and I'm happy to give you a tour. Are there any questions? Questions?
Why do they live there? Besides the main person? Why do the others live?
So the person who lives there full time is just our president. Well, yes, just our president. In the 1920s, when we first got headquarters, it was seen as very important that our president be in DC. We're a national organization. They needed to be in DC when the action is ready to go to the Hill at a moment's notice. And then it became tradition. There's definitely some of the ladies haven't lived there, or they brought their husbands, which they weren't supposed to do. But those are all the little GFWC urban legends. The other women who come are there for our executive board meeting, which is a week long, where the committee meetings are happening. So it's easier to stay on site. It's cheaper for us than shipping them across the street to the Marriott. And then every president has a crew of like 6 or 7 assistants who come and spend weeks at a time making 3 meals a day for the executive committee, doing the flowers, doing the events, polishing the silver. It was an adjustment. I have never worked at a museum where somebody was there overnight and could do whatever they wanted. Good times. Yeah.
What sort of events do they host? Is the group philanthropic in nature, or is it, what's the purpose of the group?
That is a good question. We actually have realized we don't have an elevator speech. The women's GFWC, our member clubs do volunteer work in the community. And so GFWC nationally guides their legislative priorities, gives them a chance to talk to each other about the successful community projects they're doing. Most of the events we hold are for ourselves, our holiday open house, for our leaders and things, but we are trying to expand, and we have done in the past more of like people, we don't rent it out per se, but other organizations that need a beautiful space for a party. Women's National Suffrage Monument held their holiday party at our building. But the assistants had to come and do it, which is better than me doing it, so I can't complain too much. Okay.
That's great.
Thank you.
So much. I will get us started with our second speaker. Our second presentation here is titled Bugs, Buildings, and Boundaries, Talking to Exterminators So They Don't Kill Your Collections by Peggy. Peg is a graduate student in the Museum Management Certificate Program at the University of South Carolina. Among other publications, she's the author of A South Carolina Jewel, celebrating the Lawrence County Museum, and comes to museum work from a combined background in teaching, corporate documentation, and applied research. She holds 2 master's degrees and has taught persuasion and communication theory at the university level. Her interest in pest management grew out of a commissioned best practices study for the Western Massachusetts firm, Federation Pest Control, in which she provided a real-world application of preventive conservation principles. Her current work focuses on documentation, conservation, and preservation as decision-making frameworks in museums, libraries, archives, and historic sites. Please help me welcome Peggy.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. Again, I'm Peggy Cwiakala, and it is pronounced Cwiakala. I know how it looks. So, I do want to start by simply saying, oh, I'm good? Okay. By simply saying, we have all been there, and it is not just you. If you have discovered pests, well, they've discovered you too. You may feel panic, embarrassment, and urgency, but I am not here to assign blame. I'm certainly not here to covet perfection, and I just want you to do what you do best, which is to slow down and protect your collections. I want to start with something very familiar. As you probably are aware, most folk songs are sung to common meter, and so is all of Gilligan's Island and most of Emily Dickinson. So, since that's how we teach one another is through rhyming, I'm going to be brave. The silverfish, they feast on glue, and larvae chew on wool. The carpet beetle eats the pest, while mold rolls in like drool. You're too kind. But what I really want you to remember is that you're in charge. Our first instinct is to act fast and to trust whoever sounds confident. But clarity is always required, and we have to think to ourselves, who really does have the authority? Staff needs to sit down and discuss, and I realize that that is not always the easiest thing to do. You have to get the right people at the table, and that means the director has to be there, and the collections and the registrar who's busy and overworked and doesn't want to be there, and facilities who is already spraying downstairs, and possibly people from the board. This is not a hallway decision. You have to walk the building. You have to put on paper what you see, and you have to talk about your collection's priorities. You must name what matters most. What objects are your highest risk? What damage is unacceptable? And what can wait? I realize too that's not easy either, because everyone in a museum has their place and their collection and what they fight for. But you have to agree on thresholds before action. What level of activity triggers monitoring? What triggers treatment? And who approves it? So you must begin to assign roles really clearly. No treatment should occur without curatorial approval. Products and methods should be disclosed in advance. Pesticides are designed to be biologically active and present in historic interiors. Those properties stain, embrittle, corrode, off-gas, and they alter the materials we hope to take care of. Monitoring and consultation should be distinguished from treatment. And by the way, that little bird was one that came and kept me company in the archives. You have to think about what you really need, a decision-making framework. You must understand the conditions before intervention and reduce risk by acting deliberately. This is not simply me telling you what your job is. This is me saying, I hope your mental health feels a little better after this talk. Having been in the situation of dealing with some pests as a woman who is terrified of almost everything, I never in a million years thought I would be the one to tell you what to do should you encounter a 6-inch spider that jumps quickly and with intent. Routine or preventative chemical applications in collection areas should not be there by default. That's something we should stitch onto a pillowcase. So, the fancy word is IPM, Integrated Pest Management. And no, there is not a national register that tells you who to call. There just isn't. What it is a decision-making framework and not a single action. And I wish I could tell you that they would do all the work for you, but they don't. This is where your natural gift for pulling together information and making sense out of what is not sensible is an absolute requirement. It prioritizes understanding conditions before intervention, and it reduces risk by not acting faster, but by acting deliberately. Museum objects, you see, are not sealed. They are not inert. They are porous and absorbent and organic, and they are already chemically fragile. IPM means identification before response, monitoring and trend analysis over time, environmental control, moisture, food, access. I don't know how many of us have put a Diet Pepsi or Diet Coke can in the little wastebasket and then gone home on a Friday night and forgot it was there. I have. I'm so ashamed. Treatment must be a last targeted and approved step because pesticides can be absorbed into wood, into paper, into textiles, and into leather. It reacts with finishes and dyes and adhesives and coatings. Residues never fully dissipate. Now, I hate to be cynical, but I have to tell you, my first instinct as a young woman was to napalm anything that came near me. Possums were not those gentle creatures that everybody says they were. They frightened me with their 9-inch teeth. Did I run into them? Yes, I did. Have I been chased by a bear? Yes, I have. So please realize, pests do not arrive by accident. They follow food, shelter, and neglect. Where crumbs collect and corners darken, history becomes edible. We want to interrupt that cycle. Think of it this way. Moisture introduces mold. Mold is very attractive to insects. Insects are well appreciated by rodents. Rodents are loved by snakes and cats. Larger mammals will come up to in a moment. You must take stock of the situation. And I want you to pause for a moment. Quietly establish who gets to decide and what counts as treatment and how urgent it is. And I am not saying that this is easy because anyone who has ever worked with a board that is in the shift of becoming governance oriented, whereas before they were in your confines every day, hands-on, knows that this is not easy. Who gets to be in authority? I wish that part I could make easier for you. But we'll go back to pests. Pests are a symptom, not the root cause. In museums, serious pest damage rarely begins with the insects. It begins with the conditions. The quiet, persistent failures of environment with moisture that softens materials, weakens defenses, and makes collections inviting to mold, insects, and loss. And yes, snakes do come into museums. Everything likes to come into museums. It's interesting in there. Archives and libraries and galleries are inviting not just to tourists, but to pests. But I want you to remember, the pesticide that you might spray in your fury at their intervention can can weaken your future conservation efforts. It weakens fibers, and it is a health risk for your staff. You must remember that. Might interest you to know about a few regional visitors. In the southeast, there are snakes and there are alligators. When we go to museum school or library school or get our masters in art, nobody says to us, by the way, there are going to be some snakes. We don't think about that. In the Midwest, raccoons and skunks. And in the Southwest, scorpions and pack rats. And they're actually rather furry, adorable creatures who steal things out of your galleries and create big nests where they put your things. In the West Coast, there are ants and roof rats. And the difference between a pack rat and a roof rat is if you are listening and it's upstairs, it's a roof rat. And they travel in groups, and they chew up things of which you were hoping to protect. In the Pacific Northwest are slugs and giant house spiders with a 3-inch leg span at least. Now, I live in South Carolina. We are no strangers to gigantic, monstrous spiders. I don't care. They still terrify me. Are they good for me? Well, for my house and for the insects and the things around us, yes. Do I treat them with pesticides? No. Am I afraid of them? Yes. In historic sites, and really anywhere, feral cats. And we all know someone who feeds the feral cats by the dumpster. And they're good people. They're kind people. They're loving people. They're trying to spay the feral cats. Every time they feed the feral cat, it very well may sneak into your property and lie on the historic bed. In the Great Plains, there are coyotes and rattlesnakes. And my favorite by far is Appalachia, where there are feral hogs that like to go under the buildings. Imagine meeting them. And black bears. So pest damage really begins with the insects, but the conditions are what you need to look for. And if you see moisture, that's when it starts. Access points, follow the ants. If the ants are coming in, you know where everything wants to come in. And if anybody's eating at their desk, I'm sorry to be that person who says they shouldn't. And if things are neglected because we're just too darn busy, I'm sorry, but that's where it starts. We have to make our collections inviting to others, but not pests. Good outcomes depend on boundaries and language. When museums define their approval, documentation, and decision thresholds in advance, pest professionals become partners in care rather than default decision makers. Does your pest management company have the required certification? You might be shocked how many people come with a canister and are not licensed. Please ask to see the licensure. But do understand that just because they have the certification does not mean that they are ethically or professionally capable of working with your collections. They just happen to be good looking in their uniform. Pest management professionals do not simply provide services, they sell them. And selling relies on confidence, reassurance, urgency, and resolution. This creates a predictable imbalance when sales techniques meet museum staff who are trained to value caution, deliberation, and collective responsibility. And may I dare to say it, we are very kind to authority. We really are polite people. And sometimes we are people who do not want to have arguments among our working sphere. You need an incident and risk report. That's a log where you record damage events and past incidents and environmental failure and emergencies that occur. You have to date it and you have to time it. I don't know anyone who really wants to do that except people that love documentation. But most museums and archives and libraries are awfully lucky if they can get one person who could actually spend the time doing that. Salespeople are taught differently, and we need to understand what their rhetoric does for them. They are told no is just the start of the conversation. And I'm sure all of us have said no to someone who just kept going. That's a training. They are also taught to understand they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting change. Also, the person who goes out to sell is told, if you believe in the solution, it's your job to keep going. They offer relief, not complexity. They offer authority, theirs, not yours. And they offer urgency to face a moment where the problem has been amplified. When you understand that, you at least have that gift of being able to face someone whose agenda you know in advance. Remember, if you're like me and being confronted with scorpions puts you on the fritz, you're awfully grateful to meet somebody who says, I can help you with this. When I moved to Irmo, South Carolina, there were scorpions in my sink in the bathroom. And I'm a mother of boys, so I really do have a bizarre sense of humor, and I usually like cool things. But the scorpions were a bit above my threshold. So I called the pest management company, and he said, you know, where there's one, there's 1,000. I said, can you be here immediately, please, sir? And I signed on the dotted line. I didn't ask him any questions, and he sprayed my property, and I'm sure he killed a great deal of things. Not proud of that. And not every exterminator is a museum partner. They must be licensed in your state, and they have to be licensed in commercial and institutional pest management. And it helps if they are experienced with institutional collections. They need to be willing to document, to disclose, and to wait, and comfortable with prevention over products. They should be able to explain IPM in plain language, not just use the acronym. But here's something else. I think it would not be unusual for you to sit down with someone and say these very things, and for them to respond, absolutely. We're going to do a research report for you. I need a check for 400, and then we'll feel qualified to work with you. So you should probably go for people who have models and other case studies that they already know. Okay. Salespeople are motivated people. None of their quotes are evil, and that's the point. They're rhetorically efficient. They're emotionally stabilizing for the seller, and they're deeply normal within sales culture. If you have ever had a sales job, you know that it is awfully high stress until you cut things out and you learn how to replace objections with a script. Sales techniques, however, do directly collide with museum values. We value deliberation, shared authority, documentation, long risk management. But a salesperson has to meet a quota. Their outcomes are tracked, they are time efficient, and they seek to calm anxious clients. Some of that is goodwill oriented. I'm not here to say anything bad about salespeople, but do understand the more anxious you are, it's a win when he can say, if you see one, there's 1,000, Peg, and I'll be right over. I thought he was the most wonderful human being. So please do remember, effective pest management is not about killing insects. Align your people, your processes, and your values before action occurs. Understand that pest management is an institutional practice rather than a technical fix. So your pest professionals become partners instead of default decision makers, but they need to be on board. IPM is not reactive spraying. A company may be legally allowed to work in a museum, but still be professionally unqualified to do so. I repeated that because I think it's one of the most important things we can remember. Monitor, track, exclude, environment, openings, and think about controls. If you'd like, I'd like to give you 5 pests to spot during a walkthrough. There are many of pests, but here's the ones that are not exotic, they are our constant companions. Silverfish. They eat paper, glue, and labels, and you see them along the baseboards, inside the cabinets, or near the paper storage, and they're like that big, and okay. And sosids are book lice. They feed on mold and paper residue, and you find them near the labels, the cardboard, or the shelving, when humidity is high and the air is still. Carpet beetles eat wool, feathers, fur, other protein materials. Their damage shows up in textiles, clothing storage, or taxidermy long before you ever see the insects. The larva does the work. And roaches, God. They don't target your collections directly, but they show up near trash, sink, break rooms, floor drains, signaling moisture and food problems in the building. It could be as simple as some of the flooring has rotted, so if you suddenly find roaches coming straight up, you may have to replace the floor. The pest company might not tell you that. So, when we started, I mentioned common meter. It's easy to carry in memory, and what we talked about today is attention and stewardship and living carefully. So if you will indulge me just one last time. The mouse moves in where crumbs remain and nests in boxes tight. The roach ignores our good intent and feeds each silent night. The snake arrives where rodents roam. The termite chews the frame. So watch, record, control the threat, or loss becomes the claim. Or loss becomes the claim. Thank you. Absolutely. You were out of time? Oh, I'm sorry if I ran over. Oh my. I have handouts, and if you need anything, just email me and I'll help.